Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first of many interviews with me. My name is Alvi, and our brilliant guest today is making a lot of waves at the moment. You might know him from reels that went viral on social media, talking about languages, linguistics, and all the things that interest us. He's an Oxford student, aspiring researcher, a multi-talented, multilingual, a Pandora's box. And I'm thrilled to welcome to you today, Fine, aka Cody Brody. How are you today?
I'm very well. I'm functioning. I'm alive and kicking.
That's right. That's the best answer, isn't it? Would you tell us a bit about your journey through languages and the field that you specialize in?
So I am a linguist, very specifically. Well, so currently I'm studying my undergraduate degree in psychology and linguistics. And my journey with languages has kind of just been a very long-standing thing where it's kind of been, I think growing up in Singapore where, things are very, like, it's a very diverse population, and there are not just a large number of Singaporean ethnic groups that live in Singapore, but also ethnic groups that are more recent, that have come more recently. I think it's just a very good place to be exposed to a lot of different languages. And I think, my interest in language sort of started when I was sort of like a teenager, basically like around 14, 15 years old, where I decided that, well, I saw a video of this teenager in America who could speak like 20 languages, and I was like, wow, I think that's really cool, and I want to be cool.
Inspiration, yeah.
Yeah,
The New York guy, no, isn't it?
yeah, it was Tim Donner, basically. I think who was an inspiration for a lot of polyglots who are around our age, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and I decided that I wanted to be like him. That didn't really work out because that was a pretty bad motivation. But I guess I started to really like just the process of learning languages, and I guess like just being able to observe the structural things. And the first language that I actually picked was Spanish, so that's quite funny. So
Oh, it's Spanish. Oh, that's right. And how is it learning Spanish coming from ancient languages?
what do you mean?
Yeah, like maybe it's easier to learn, let's say, Romance languages if your mother tongue is a Romance language, is a Latin language.
Oh yeah,
Is it
yeah.
difficult to study to have language? Was Spanish your second language, or did you already
No.
learn English before?
So in Singapore, so I'm ethnically Chinese, and so in Singapore, I was forced, but forced is a word. But yeah, I was forced to
Before,
learn
but you
Chinese.
eventually saw like the positivity out of it, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. So I was forced to learn Mandarin Chinese specifically because it's standard Chinese, right? To learn that in school from start of school all the way until I finished. So yeah, that was so. I think I was coming in with the background of those two languages, um, so English and Mandarin Chinese, and Spanish is quite a different structure.
Mhm.
I'd have to admit, compared to what I was used to, because Chinese is a very analytical language, so you don't have much conjugation, much verbal morphology, basically. So,
It's
you
more
know,
telegraphic, right? In that sense.
well, yes, I mean that's sort of how the writing system applies itself to the language,
Yeah.
but just in the grammatical structures themselves,
Mhm.
they don't inflect at all. So basically, well, you can think of them as being independent of one another. So instead of having a future tense conjugation, so you know, in modern Spanish, this is the id a, or like the id, then infinitive construction. But in Chinese, or like you would have like the ra construction at the end of a word, basically.
Yeah.
But in Mandarin Chinese, you just have a word that means later, that you put in front of the verb that you're going to do. So
Yeah,
like,
it's le, right? Or
well, le
did
is
I?
after. So
Oh,
le is
that's
kind of
right.
like
Yeah.
a
Oh my
stative
God. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely. Oh, that's interesting. And I actually want to talk about your journey through like learning each and every single one of the language that you speak. I'm interested on that. In a couple of minutes, I would like to know first, why is like, linguistics interesting for society? Let's say, why did linguistics interest you? What does linguistics mean to you?
I think inherently language has a lot of value to people, if that makes sense. Like people use language, in every facet of their life. And I'd say that language isn't just this, sort of metaphorical object where it's, we speak a language, right?
Yeah.
It's also, very inherently tied to one's identity, right? One's social, what their perception of oneself in a social context. And at the
Mhm.
same time, like it's, I mean, there's the social markers, but at the same time, there's also a lot that you can like observe with it when it comes to like the medical field as well,
Mhm.
with I mean, one of my research areas is speech errors, and then you can kind of see how people's disorders in their speech is also like sort of related to how their, how do I put it, like it's related to how certain illnesses or certain things might go wrong when people are
Mhm.
when the people do have neuro sort of like degenerative disorders and things like that.
Mhm.
At the same time, it's also applicable to, like computer science. It's applicable to so many facets of like computer science in that, like the development of AI and the
Yeah,
development of
absolutely. And
language
develop
models.
languages. Uh,
Yeah,
is it called correctly? And when we talk about like languages, applying it to um, software models, people say like, yeah, like a new language model. I'm missing the word, but is it appropriate to say a language related to how a program operates or how software thinks?
for sure. I mean, if you want to think about grammatical, like grammar specifically, a grammar is just a set of vectors. If you want to really think about it mathematically, I guess it's a set of vectors or a set of mathematical like equations that basically state what words can go together in what order and what semantically, if you want to layer it, with semantics and syntax being separate, which sometimes they're not, sometimes they are, right? I'm
Mhm.
not a computational linguist, so I can't answer these very well, but basically in that way you can kind of consider those, to be languages in that sense.
Interesting. And I'd like to go to a topic now that is largely and broadly discussed about, and it's even partly the reason why many people start learning a new language, even. The long
Mm,
discussion of whether each new language gives us a new lens through which to look at the world. Do
mm.
languages actually shape the way we process existence? That idea is largely covered, if I'm not wrong, in in Worfianism, but not every single linguist and researcher agrees with that, and both parties have their arguments, absolutely. What is your take on that?
Okay, so I'll just very quickly outline the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So
Yeah.
basically, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a hypothesis that was, or a theory, as with everything in science, it's a theory,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That was
absolutely.
come up with in the early 1900s, I think,
Mhm.
by Edward Sapir, and I can't remember Whorf's first name. But anyway, so these two American linguists who basically believed that certain Native American groups, so basically indigenous American groups in the United States, they had words that differentiated their specific experiences so differently, or like described specific experiences so differently from the way that the sort of Eurocentric ideal did, so English.
Mhm.
And basically, it was stating that they therefore must have a different experience of what the world is around them. And I mean,
Mhm.
okay, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, I can be very controversial because sometimes it states to an extent that it can, or at least it can be used to an extent to hyper generalize a group of people to be
Mhm.
more perceptive, or and it can be very exoticizing where it's like, oh, this group is so unique, they are so exotic, because of the way that they see this. But at the same time, it does have some bearing in the sense that it might influence the way a person might think about certain things, but I don't think it literally impacts the way that they see it. So a good example is the color, the color names basically. So there's a video on the Vox YouTube channel, which has actually got a very good example where it talks about how different languages have different ways of classifying color. And so there's some languages where, there's just light, dark, and that's the only distinction, or, light, dark, and red. And I mean, if you were to do a neurophysiological study, so you check their neurons basically, they're not inherently seeing any colors differently. They might just not label it as, oh, this is red, this is just light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And so a very good example of this is like Japanese, because Japanese until pretty recently didn't have the color for green. So
but how was it called? Like all that shade was the name of it?
So Ao, which is written in Chinese as Ting, I don't know if you're familiar with that Ting. It's like
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it was written, so basically Ao meant blue green. So it referred to blue and green at the same time. Yeah. And so they would describe, I can't remember if it was like traffic lights as blue, like red, yellow, blue.
But what about like a landscape where you have pretty different shades or hues for the grass and the sky, like the pretty conventional landscape when we think about it? You've got the like light blue or blue, and you've got green. I can imagine that it might have been difficult for someone that's not used to expressing themselves in Japanese. It would be quite difficult to explain that, or at least to put your mind through it.
Definitely. I mean, personally, well, I mean, I can't put myself in the shoes of a person who is experiencing this, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, definitely to some degree, you would expect that, that it would be challenging to learn, right? But yeah, I think back to the point. So, a very good example is like how green apple in Japanese is aoringo, which literally means blue apple. If you want to think about that.
That's interesting. Wow, and the implications of that. But you were telling me that some time ago that Japanese didn't have a word for green. Do they have now?
Certainly do now. It's midori. I don't speak Japanese, but this is from what I've learned in passing. But and so a very good, so it's interesting because the word midori was also borrowed from, like the character was borrowed from Chinese, but so I would assume that would have entered the language at the same time, but like that's another question which I can't answer because that's
okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you, like,
it's not like typology, like the etymology. Yeah,
absolutely. I was going to ask you that, because it's not like Japanese origin. Origin. Yeah, it's interesting.
But I mean, that's quite an interesting thing. But another Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, another argument for it that you kind of see sometimes is with certain languages like Aymara. I think it was used with Aymara. It's another very good language YouTuber called Native Lang, Nativlang, who does a very good video on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And basically it says that, the word for future in, how in like the general Eurocentric idea of time, we face the future and the past is behind. Right. But like they say, in Aymara, the past is behind you. No, the past is in front of you because you can see it, but the future is behind you because you can't know what it is. So
that's but isn't it also probably one idea would be that language influences the way that we like cognition, let's say. But now I'm thinking about it, like probably the way we think translates itself in the language that we speak, like because language is a tool in a way and we create it, let's say. So the way we see the world makes it that we see the need to create a word for this concept or for that concept, kind of like isn't it like a mirror?
It's interesting because I think this delves into like this the realm of theoretical linguistics.
Hmm.
So, it's this idea of whether language is inherently used to talk to ourselves, or we use it for, or that we use language for communication. And there's a big argument, that Chomsky has made, like Noam Chomsky, who's like a very influential linguist. Anyone who studied linguistics will have heard of him,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically he's like, it's a big question. So, I mean, Chomsky's views have also changed over the years, but do I personally think, but like, it really just boils down to whether the linguist thinks that language is used as an internal mechanism, or whether it's used as an external communication tool. And so my answer to that is I don't know.
Yeah, the emoji. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
That's
but I mean,
really
coming
interesting.
back to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, I think
Yeah.
one last very good example that I can think of is like, for example, Gugu Yimithir, which is a northeastern Queensland language. So it's spoken in the, how Australia is kind of shaped like
Yeah.
that, right? So
Yeah,
it's on the
absolutely. Yeah.
northeast point of it,
Yeah.
all the way in the northeast, and it's an Aboriginal language of Australia, which interestingly, I think it's Gui Mithir, or one of the languages in that region, that basically uses their direction as, like, for example, if they want to say something like "I'm fine" or something like that, they say "I'm facing north" or "I'm facing a certain direction." And a really interesting psychological study that was done was like, it found that these people would pretty much accurately know where north was at all times, like where the compass was pointing at all times.
Wow, like
And
the
it was,
sense of orientation. I've heard of that. Like, is it the Cook Tayor community?
yes, I think it might be
Yeah, I'm
Cook Tayor,
butchering it.
not Kuku Yimithir. Yeah, I think I might be thinking of Cook Tayor. Yeah,
Okay, no, but
anyway,
that's
it's in the
interesting.
northeastern region.
I'll Google that, the other one that you said, because I haven't heard of that. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
but
it's very
so
broad.
in that way, I think coming back to the core argument that I might want to bring up is that I feel that language may not necessarily literally impact how you see the world, but I think it can be used as a tool
Mhm.
to direct your attention. So that's from the more psychological side of things, is that like your attention and like what you cognitively process can
Mhm.
definitely be affected by like language. I mean, for example, like there was an example, like this is from a purely psychological study where they did like a double listening, so dichotic listening tool, like dichotic listening exercise,
Yeah.
where they basically play one message into one ear and another message into the other ear,
Yeah.
and at the same time, basically like they ask you to pay attention to only one and not the
Mhm.
other. And then before the experiment happened, these people were like they were given like a conditioning, sort of like a
Mhm.
conditioning phase, where if they heard the name of like a city, sorry, so they'll hear Paris or
Yeah.
Rome or like Singapore, whatever, Buenos Aires, right, and things like that,
Yeah.
they would receive a shock, like a small electric shock. And it was very interesting because even when a city name that wasn't one that was played before played into the ear that they weren't paying attention to,
Yeah.
they would still get a shock. Like, as in, their skin would like increase in conductance in preparation for a shock.
Okay.
So basically, a very interesting thing is, if you look at these like language priming experiments, or at
Mhm.
least you can see that it does have a profound effect on your physiology and the way that you might think,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And the way that you might handle your attention and things like that. And so, or at least, it's a chicken or egg question of whether it's
Mhm.
affecting your attention and your attention affects language. But basically, yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that it definitely can direct cognition, but I don't think it's, this big wow, it's going to change everything.
Yeah,
Ultimately.
pretty clear. Yeah, the very, very interesting, broad, the applications, absolutely. But you explained it very, very clear, and with multiple examples. Yeah, thank you. And I know that it's helped many people like me that have that those doubts around that idea. Now, a different question. I've always wondered, do we know which was the oldest language ever to exist?
So I get this question sometimes, and there is a lot of social implications that come with it, right?
Yeah,
There are people who claim,
I can imagine.
like one of the languages that I speak, like Tamil, is quite commonly claimed to be the oldest language in the world, which is a highly problematic statement. I think, okay, I'll cover what is the oldest language in the world. Archaeologically, it's probably Sumerian, as in that we can identifiably identify something to, in the sense that, you know, we have a written language. What's the oldest written language, right? It's Sumerian.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because, you
That's
know,
important to add. Yeah, written
yeah, like
language.
the old cuneiform texts that we
Yeah.
have. So that is our oldest recorded, like, written language. But what is the oldest language is such a, well, I wouldn't say stupid question, but more like a difficult question to ever, like, because the parameters of it are not defined, right? Because
Okay.
in a sense that language is a dynamic thing, right? Oh, give me a moment. Let me just tell. Yeah. So language is a dynamic thing,
Yeah.
right? Where it doesn't essentially ever stay the same between, like, even between like the English that I speak and the English that my parents speak, you know, it's not the same. And like, for example, like the Singaporean Creole that my parents speak and that I speak, like the Creole is different already. And you know, I mean, it's a relatively new language in the sense that it's only come up in about past like 100 years. But even then, you know, it's constantly changing, it's constantly shifting. So, and I mean, at the end of the day, all current languages now were spoken, or at least all oral languages that we know of, big generalization, right? All have an ancestor that was spoken 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, right? That has evolved into this current form, right? But would you say that the current form is the same as the form then? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so coming to Tamil, right, a very good example is that people like to argue that Tamil's oldest language in the world. Wow, it's so difficult to learn because it does have a very long, you know, history of literature, right? I think a couple thousand years. But even then, that is in what we call Sen Tamil. So it's in High Tamil. And because it's had this long culture, this one sort of like consistent cultural, liturgical like body, the language has resisted quite a bit of change. But it has now evolved into a form where there are two different levels or registers, where there is a colloquial form known as Golden Damar and a high form known as Sentamar. And both are quite different, like in terms of the structures that are used, in terms of the pronunciations of quite a lot of the words. And then, but would you argue that these two are different languages in and of themselves, or are they just two varieties of the same language? Right? Again, that's an incredibly political statement inherently, because, you know, like, of course, you know, people would say, oh, they're the same language. But, you know, if I mean, for me as a learner of Tamil, you know, having learned one, like, I mean, I've kind of learned both and to like some degree, but like, if I were to learn only one, learning the like understanding the other would kind of be like, I kind of recognize that, but not really, you know. Or I mean, it's a good example. It's like as a Spanish speaker, right? Especially as an Argentinian Spanish speaker, I guess. Like,
Sí, sí.
like listening to Portuguese, right?
Uy,
Like,
sí.
yeah.
Cuando generalmente, like generally when we hear Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, let's say to be more detailed, and or Italian, let's say, we tend to grab multiple words, and since the grammar doesn't differ that greatly, let's say we could hear someone speak and understand the gist out of it. Let's say, like some fine details, we might not understand them, but yeah, as Spanish speakers, yeah, that's right. We could kind of get what's being
Exactly.
spoken about. It depends
Right.
on
But
multiple
then
factors, obviously, but yeah.
exactly. But then, you know, in that case, Spanish and Portuguese are treated like two different languages, right? So in that way, is is this old form and this, new modern form used? Are they two different languages? Who knows? So I guess in that sense, it's very difficult to answer. Coming back to the point, it's very difficult to answer what is the oldest language. And then if we go to the question of what's the youngest language, language is always changing, right? And so you could argue that the kids that are just learning to speak now, they are speaking the youngest languages.
That
But
is the
like,
youngest
if you want to
language.
think about
In multiple meanings, it's the youngest language.
exactly,
Like,
right?
pun
But if you want to think
intended.
about the sort of like, oh, sorry to interrupt, but like, so if you want to think about like the sort of like documented change of like certain languages to become newer languages, a very good example will be another Australian Aboriginal language, which is Djurbal. So interestingly, Djurbal is developing into what we call young Djurbal now, where the younger generation, hasn't really been learning the language properly, or at least formally. And because they all grow up with English as their first language, English is having a profound influence on Djurbal that's spoken now. And so there's a whole new version of Djurbal that's arising within the last 50 years that has a grammar that's completely unrecognizable to original Djurbal, or at least Djurbal spoken by the parents. And interestingly enough, even in my own research in Oxford, I'm currently doing research with this project called the Engano Project, and so we're documenting the Engano language, which is spoken on a small island, well, not really small, but like an island off the coast of Sumatra in Indonesia. And the language has about 700 speakers. And it's interesting because the language has been documented twice in the past, one by a person named Kayla, who's German, and one more by, I can't remember their name, but they were Dutch. And that was in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, respectively. And interestingly, the language that is spoken today is so unrecognizable from the languages then. Like, for example, like a house, right? The word house is in modern Engano is yup, but in the past it was uba.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it differs from the documentation a couple of centuries ago.
not even a couple, one.
Not even. Yeah, that's
And
right.
if you think about it, it's just like
In the
two
1900s.
generations, about 3 generations ago, basically, 3 or 4 generations ago. So it wasn't, and like the speaker that we're getting our data from, he's in his 70s. So technically, it would have been like his parents or his grandparents who spoke that way. And the one that he speaks is completely different. And so, yeah, languages, especially small languages with no sort of written standards or literature, tend to change very quickly because they change with the needs of the population, or they change with the influences of the other languages that are spoken in that region.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, for example, Engano has lost its case markers, and it's started to develop these like they've got remnants of the case markers there, but like they've just completely dropped them. Now they don't exist anymore in modern Engano. And yeah, I mean, there are other cases of differences. I mean, you can go to our website and check it out on our papers that are being published.
We will link down below. Absolutely, of course. We will link
yes.
You mentioned it a couple minutes ago about Creoles, right?
Yes.
I think it's a topic worth dedicating a couple minutes on. Would you like to explain you very briefly what Creoles are?
Yeah. So, okay. The definition of Creole tends
It's not brief.
It's not very brief, right? And because it's the question of are mixed languages, pidgins, Creoles, and Creoloids, are they all the same thing, right? Because I mean, I don't think we have enough time to get into everything, but what I think basically a Creole is, a good way to describe it, or mixed language, I think a mixed language is a better word to use, is that I mean, mixed languages also have their own classification and like their own examples. But
it's okay. I don't want you to suffer here, but plus you're very knowledgeable. That's why it's like I understand that you've got plenty of examples and everything too. So yeah, I mean, just remember that we are like in general, and or me at least, we are like enthusiasts, language enthusiasts. We might investigate here and there a bit, or know a bit more about hypotheses and like theories and stuff. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just feel free
So
to
yeah,
simplify
just
it.
very
Don't worry.
quickly cover what that is. So these languages basically arise from, so okay, a good umbrella term to refer to all them are
Okay.
contact languages. So they are languages that arise from the contact of multiple languages, multiple previous varieties of language that previously had not come into contact before. And in the case of Creole specifically, they normally have a colonial connotation to them, where they arise from the contact, or at least the learning of the colonial language from the perspective of adult speakers of a different language. And that is called a pidgin, right? So it's like where they develop to talk among each other first. Or like, so it can be like from like one non-European language or multiple non-European languages plus the European language. And then they need, these group of people, adults, they need to learn this language without any formal teaching. Generally in the past, I mean, there's a whole lot of colonial baggage that comes with it. And basically they need to learn how to talk to their colonizers, and they need to learn how to talk among each other, right? And so they would develop something called a pidgin, which is like an informal, not informal, but like a mixed way of mixing everything together to best basically combine their own grammatical structures and their own like ideas in their head about how language is structured, and use generally the words of the language of the prestige, so the colonial language, to talk to one another. So
But
that's a
are they
pidgin.
a
And then when
transition to a new language, or are they a
yes.
language per se with its own grammar, dictionaries, and so on?
So I would personally argue that Creoles are unique in their own way, but I guess they're also inherently still tied to their settler like to their ancestor languages, right?
Right.
And Creoles is just a very interesting thing because classification of Creoles, are Creoles a part of the colonial language? Are they a part of the indigenous languages that were spoken there, or like the base the non-colonial languages that were spoken there previously? Because they normally share grammatical structures with the base languages, or like the languages of the land to begin with, but they have a lot of vocabulary and some grammatical structures of the colonial language. So would you want to prioritize the grammar or the vocabulary as helping to classify them as being from one or the other, right? So that's a very challenging question for most Creolists. But anyway, I digress. So a pidgin forms when these languages sort of like people have to informally learn and sort of come up with a new language to communicate with one another. And when this language is passed on as a first language to kids, to children, that's when it becomes a Creole, generally.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's not when the others are starting to make their way around using both languages, or what they prioritize first, but it becomes when it's passed down in like the first generation, let's say, or when it's passed
Exactly.
down on
So
the
that's when a
offspring.
Creole arises. And another good example is, and then, so just to very quickly explain a mixed language is when they're normally bilingual speakers of like natively bilingual speakers of two languages that just start to combine them in daily speech to the point where they just kind of, so there's no power imbalance like there is with colonial languages. So they just kind of combine them because they also all spoken natively.
Do we say that Spanglish is is an example of that?
You could definitely argue. I mean, the very classic example that's cited is Michif, which is spoken by Métis people in specifically Quebec in Canada, where it's a literal half combination of French and Cree. So it's very interesting because they use Cree grammatical structures, but the particles are all French.
Okay, so that is a mixed language, right? It's not Creole.
That's a mixed language because it was developed by people who spoke Cree with one parent and French with the other.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm excited to understand the difference. I believe
It's just quite interesting because and I mean that's quite an interesting mixed language. I mean, you could argue that Spanglish, especially in specific communities like Miami, like
Yeah.
Miami, it's influenced Miami English. Like Miami English is a documented sort of variety of English which has started to be influenced by Spanish.
Your dialect,
Um,
yeah. I was I came across the other day with an article analyzing exactly that the new English dialect that it's emerging in Miami, something like that, like a very
mm,
clickbaity title. Um, and they mentioned there that you could just go around the city and hear phrases like, "I want to make a party." Instead of to have a
yes,
party, because in Spanish it would be hacer una fiesta, so it's like hacer to make a party, and those
exactly.
kinds of things. And that brings me to another question that I wanted to ask you is, in Spanish we've got the Real Academia Española, which basically is an entity that regulates Spanish use so that Spanish doesn't lose its essential unity, and I'm quoting from the
Mm.
webpage. I understand that not all languages have their own entity, right? Yeah.
Nope.
I saw that
Yeah.
coming.
I
And
mean, yeah.
English is one of them, right? But
Mm, yeah.
there isn't like a English academy. So I think, like, does not having an institution mean that the language is in danger in some kind of way?
I mean, again, this boils down to what we consider a language, right?
Hmm.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, languages being endangered have a very specific definition. So endangerment is sort of when languages like are not being passed, or like a variety of a language is not being passed on to the kids. So that variety can be endangered, but the language as a whole is unendangered. So
Hmm.
for example, it might be for what was a good example of a language that for okay. So a good example will be Singaporean Min Chinese. So
Hmm.
specifically, so you know how all the Chinese dialects are called dialects, but they're actually pretty much unintelligible to one another.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
I thought I understood some Chinese or like some Mandarin or something, but yeah, no, it's absolutely nothing
yeah,
like. And Arabic as well, right?
yes,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Arabic
Yeah,
as
but
well.
you've got the Fusha, but then you've got plenty dialects. I mean, almost as many dialects of Arabic as are Arabic speaking countries in a way.
Exactly, if not more, right? Because
Yeah.
certain countries have multiple accents or multiple varieties, multiple dialects, right? But like for example, like Singaporean Min Chinese has stopped being transmitted to the youth, so people my age don't speak it anymore.
Okay.
Um, right. Um, or another good example is like Singaporean, like Baba Melayu, which is a Creole between Min Chinese and Malay that has been spoken here for a couple hundred years. It's a native language of my grandmother. I never learned it. My mom never learned it. And I think there's a predicted like maybe like 100 speakers left in Singapore, who are all in their 80s and 90s, basically. And
Okay.
so
So that
this
means that
language,
it's endangered in that sense. As time goes
exactly,
by, eventually there won't be any
any
native
native
speakers.
speakers left. Exactly. So this variety of Malay, basically, because it's still very heavily Malay, this
Mhm.
variety of Malay is endangered. But Malay as a language as a whole is very vibrant. I use it with my Malay friends sometimes. Like I use it when I'm talking to like other like Malay people here, or I use it when I'm talking to my friends in Malaysia. But that variety itself can be endangered, but the
Mhm.
language as a whole could be very healthy. You know,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I like the adjective healthy. You've got endangered, you've got healthy, healthy
yeah.
state of language. Oh, I've never heard of that. It's cool. Before moving on to a new topic, and on the topic of Creoles, I've heard some linguists say that Creoles are, in a way, detached from the meaningless things that make a language difficult to learn, such as noun gender, for example, or
Mm.
tones. And given those characteristics, I've heard people say that Creoles are the best languages. And my question is that what we strive for as humanity? Like, is that all there is to language? Coming up with a language that is able to express the complexity of human thoughts, but being the least complex as possible itself?
Oh goodness. This is such a bag of beans that we're opening.
I don't
Is
doubt that.
okay, so Creoles are a very touchy topic because there are so many sociological implications behind them. So for anyone who is interested in Creoles, you need to know two very big people, John McWhorter and Michel de Graaf.
Okay.
So Michel de Graaf is at MIT and John McWhorter is at Columbia. And for the past 30 years, they just keep publishing papers fighting each other. It is the most hilarious thing on the planet because you would see that like every
I've never heard John McWhorter. Yeah, I've seen a couple of his lectures.
Yeah, every 1 or 2 years, you just see them release a paper that's like, the other guy is wrong, the other guy is wrong. But basically, to boil it down, McWhorter argues that Creoles are simple. Creoles are simpler languages. And then like de Graaf argues that they are complex in their own ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can boil this down into two things. But two questions: are Creoles simple? Are they considered more like you said earlier? Are they less complex, right? And the other question that we'll answer is that we'll address is, are Creoles what we strived for, right? So I'll answer the first one first. Are Creoles more simple? Short answer is it depends on what you define as simple. Because
okay,
they might not have extra things, like for example, in certain dialects or certain varieties of Singaporean Creole, we don't have plurals. So basically, you pluralize things by reduplicating them. So you can be like, oh no, well, in very specific older generations, they might do that. But for example, basically like the S is lost quite often. So it'll be something like, pass me the cup. What's a good example? Like, all the garlic gonna spill on the floor. So all the garlic, all of the garlics have been spilled on the floor basically, or like, he go and break all the cup, yeah. So all the cups have been broken. He break all the cup, yeah. Right. So in a way, is that more simple? Maybe you don't have to differentiate between them. At the same time, we have very uniquely semantic particles that have like very specific semantic meaning. So for example, like Singlish to learn is very difficult one. What does one mean? It has no practical use to like a native English speaker, but it basically, to me, it sounds like you are making this, like, I don't even know how to describe it as a linguist.
Okay.
But it's like,
we can kind of get the gist that they're not simpler.
Correct. So it's like, for example, Singlish is very difficult. Singlish is very difficult one. So there's a slight different mood there, or like, and like for example, like the particles that we use at the end. So it's actually taken from both Malay's la particle and the combination of Chinese's la particle. So for example, like, I mean, the la particle is like I got do already. I got do already. So is this an indicator of, like, is this use of already? Is this considered a verbal morphology thing? Is it, is it tense? Is this now complex? But at the same time, is it just because it's not from English, is it less complex? You see what I mean? So it comes with a lot of baggage of certain linguistic constructs being considered less complex or more complex. But maybe I would say that Creoles generally, or like mixed languages, because there's arguments that Singlish isn't even considered a Creole; it's a Creoloid. It's
okay.
But in any case, the whole argument of whether it's complex or not just kind of boils down to what do you define. But what I can, and I think both McWhorter and de Graaf agree, is that Creoles tend not to overcomplicate. So, for example, like I think it was like the gender system in the West African. This is very hazy. I studied this 2 years ago. Um,
Okay.
like the very so how African languages tend, like specifically Bantu languages, tend to have a very complex grammatical gender system. So
Yes.
animate, not animate, human,
Okay.
tree, like it's got like, I think like Swahili has like 10 genders or something like that. So Fong, which is which is not a Bantu language, I think, but one of the languages which also has quite a complex system. Or it might have not been Fong. It was one of the other Bantu languages anyway. And so in the Caribbean Creoles, where quite a lot of the ancestors of Caribbean people spoke this language, one of the Bantu languages, there's no grammatical gender distinction to this extent.
Okay.
They just
Yeah.
kind of follow the French grammatical gender distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the quote unquote over complications that come with this, or like over specifications, I think complicated is a difficult word to use, but over specifications, it's not specific, it's not maybe as down to the bone specific as their progenitor languages.
Yeah,
So yeah.
because we pretend or we think we can ask simple questions or like get simple answers, but rather in the questions itself, when we ask like what's the best language or what's simpler or like complex, we actually have plenty of words there that need to be defined and need to be we need to get rid of the, let's see, the subjectiveness out of it.
100%.
So, and as to the creation of languages, what importance does beauty have? Let's say in the phonemes, in the graphemes. Uh, did it really matter how beautiful, like aesthetically pleasing it looked, like an A, for example, or some kind of other grapheme in any kind of language, or the musicality itself? How important beauty is when creating a language?
I see. Okay. I'm just going to very quickly answer the previous question again because I didn't finish the answer. But it was about Creole. Don't worry. Don't worry. But it was about Creoles being a better language.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've ever heard someone actually say that Creole's a better language. So I mean, I would say that, language is language, it's whatever someone's used to. Maybe they might be more useful for computational models because it's less over specific. But are they more beautiful? Are they, or like, well, back to the beauty question. Are they more beautiful, or are they more useful? Are they more concise? Are they more well, concise? Ooh, okay, so more subjective. Are they more
Yeah,
beautiful?
but I think it's
Are they more
related to a question that I wanted to ask you like a couple in a couple minutes. So don't worry.
Are they more
Yeah.
beautiful? Are they more useful? Are they more effective? The answer to that question is, well, it's whatever you want to make of it, and it's whatever the speaker themselves wants to make of the language, So at the end of the day,
It's a language. We
yeah,
should embrace it, shouldn't we?
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and
Um,
also, yeah,
but
yeah. I
yeah,
don't
I
want to
think
cut you.
coming back to this beauty question,
Yeah,
I don't particularly understand what you mean. Okay, but I'm very quickly turn on my fan.
yeah. Don't worry.
Sorry, I'm back. But yes, so coming back to that question, I don't really understand what you mean by beauty, like when it comes to creating it. So what do you mean? Is this specifically to do with like constructed languages, or
Um, whenever a language was thought of, or like whenever the first person decided to or like the first group of people, let's say, drew the first graphemes or like letters or whatever it is in different languages, and whenever they started coming up with sounds to match those graphemes, was it important how it sounds, how if it sounded aesthetically pleasing, or was it the only important thing to convey a certain message, or the serve for communication, or was it important how it sounded? Was it important that it sounded
well,
aesthetically pleasing, or that you could write it I don't know, aesthetically, we're talking about like very abstract and subjective things. But yeah, like I don't think that we can completely dissociate, because with language we've created multiple pieces of
Mm,
art. So was it really into consideration when the first people start defining that language? And even with the things that we've been talking about, we've been seeing that languages are alive in a way, and are going through changes and being
mm,
influenced, and and even to this day they're going through, like, they're dynamic in that sense. So
mhm.
we could even extend it to this day and age. Is beauty, or how a language sounds, or how a language is written, is beauty important in that sense? Beauty is a very broad term, because I couldn't find a broader term.
I see. I okay. How would I talk about this? I would say that in the past, people didn't really pay attention when we were developing writing systems. I think if you're talking about writing systems specifically, I don't think people really took it into consideration. It was whatever was most useful to convey information at the time. Y de hecho, un buen ejemplo el ñ en español
Sí.
también, porque, well, I mean, we can switch to Spanish if it's staying, but like, for example, ñ,
Sí.
right? It was the like the em português é tio, mas em espanhol não sei o nome. Like the tio, like
Sí, yo no
the
sabía eso. Ay, pero qué vergüenza. No conozco eso en mi propia lengua materna. No, sí, eso. Me sale sedilla, pero no, la sedilla es la otra.
sí.
Intentaré hablar lo más neutra posible, porque sé que nos están viendo personas de todas partes del mundo, pero
Sí,
indefectiblemente mi
porque esta
tonada.
es una cosa que no les importa.
A ver, vamos a
En
buscar.
general, por la población,
Quiero
¿no?
ver. Eh, nombre
O
de. Nombre del palito.
el
Me da gracia porque cuando uno googlea
palito.
nombre del palito, se llama Virguilla.
Guilla. Ah,
Pero está mal
oh,
escrito esto. Virgulilla. Virgulilla o virgulilla.
yeah,
According to
vir,
Google. Wikipedia. No, no.
virgulilla.
Sí, o tilde. Tilde es más fácil de
Tilde.
pronunciar.
Tilde también, sí, de
Vamos con
tilde.
tilde. Tú.
Ok, de tilde.
De
Sí, de
tilde.
tilde. Sí, tilde.
Sí.
Y en portugués es chiu. Tiu en Portugal. Es chiu en Brasil.
Ah.
But yeah. Um, so for example, that originated as just a short form of to say that something was stronger in pronunciation. So it
Ujú.
was people who were lazy. It was when monks in like Spain who were lazy to write double N. So like for example,
Ah,
anno, anno. So in italiano,
sí,
like la parola per año è
sí,
anno.
sí.
See, and so it's using like so. But the scribes at that time thought, eh, puedes escribir un tilde. Es un poco más fácil, ¿no?
Sí,
Y so they just wrote,
lo es. Más económico
right?
también.
And it wasn't just limited to ends, actually. It was also limited, like for certain diphthongs, if I remember correctly, I remember reading up on this pretty recently, but it was like with certain stronger sounds, like if they just wanted to say that this was a strong sound, they put a tilde. But then eventually when they standardized the Spanish spelling, they eventually put like the ñ, like the tilde, only on the ñ because that stuck and because the sound of Spanish had changed by then.
Ujú,
So the double N had disappeared and had become a glide, so a ñ, or at least the palatal consonant. So from a
ujú,
n, it became anno, like
ujú.
anno, right? Anno as in anno,
Sí, sí, sí.
and anno as in the
Sí, sí, sí.
year, right?
Sí.
It became anno and año. So they kept the tilde. So in a way, was it beauty? It feels more like function to me than beauty.
Yeah, it
In
does.
this case, I mean, certain other cases like the development of the Chinese script
Ujú.
tends to be a bit more I guess beauty was considered a bit more, or at least like calligraphy, like that history has been quite long. So I guess, in terms of the writing, I guess the beauty played a part into, how certain things were written and the evolution from the oracle bone script. So the really old like carvings on turtle bones, to, modern Chinese spelling, or like writing method, I guess not spelling, but like writing method that is sort of originated from like the way that the brush and the beauty of the brush was appreciated at the past. And the same can be said for a lot of other Asian scripts, because they've had quite a long time to develop outside, on their own as well. And so they've all developed their own liturgical histories and whatnot. And it is the same with the Brahmi scripts. So the different scripts of like India and Southeast Asia, where it was based off of, like what was the most practical to write on at the time. And then after that, it was like, oh, what's the most beautiful way of writing this, right? And so it was just dependent on the language. So like, to return to the question, does beauty play a part in it? I'm sure it does. I think the fun thing about humans is that we value things that inherently have no value, like beauty.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Wow, it sounds simple, but it's a bomb that you've you've threw there. Okay. Wow. Yeah, I mean, we could discuss it in multiple psychological levels. Yeah,
humans don't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And and what was I going to say? One last thing before moving on. Another, let's say, conception. It's quite broad. Does learning languages make you smarter? And I would like to extend that to, does making languages make you more empathetic? But does making languages make you, how you say this, increase your ego in that kind of sense? I've heard actually like the most positive ones. I've heard, yeah, learning languages make you feel, make you, let's say, more empathetic, make you understand people better. Learning languages make you smarter, make you, allow you to think, I don't know, like in multiple ways, whatever. But I like to look at the other side as well, and probably think maybe learning languages, I think, and then I'll leave you obviously to expand on it. But I think that it depends on each person and how they want to deal with that. If you are an empathetic person, if you want to be, if you strive to be an empathetic person, then probably learning languages will allow you to get there. And if you are already like kind of like a nonsensical person, then any kind of tool will make your ego boost.
Okay.
Oh no, another second beat. Yeah.
Because how do you measure intelligence? Like, what is intelligence, Because IQ tests have a very long history of basically just being used to discriminate against certain people.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
IQ like formalized education and everything. Like, I would argue that language does not make you smarter, because what is smartness? What is intelligence? It's an abstract concept.
Yeah.
And to me, some of the smartest, well, at least some of the best polyglots I know are people who have, like, for example, like one of the best polyglots I know, he's like an old Singaporean guy here. Like, he speaks about 4 or 5 languages. He never passed primary school. Like, he dropped out of primary school at he dropped out of school at like age 8 or 9. Or no, age 10, he dropped out of school, basically. And he's he made a really successful business, becoming a farmer, like becoming like a horticulturalist, and like a specializing in orchid growing and orchid farming specifically. And he speaks quite a lot of languages. He's been around the world. He's incredibly intelligent in that sense, but he speaks a lot of languages. But is he intelligent because he learned the languages, or was he just intelligent to begin with and just didn't have the opportunities in school? right? So to me, there's no way to quantify it. And at the same time, would I say that languages maybe make you think maybe better on your feet? Because yes, so language does have an impact on your working attention. There was a paper that was done, there was a research that was done basically seeing that bilingual individuals tend to have a faster reaction time during like high cognitive load experiments. So basically like multitasking, they have a better multitasking ability. Are they smarter for that multitasking ability? No. Do I think anyone is smarter than anyone else? No. And like that's simply an answer for me. It's like the concept of intelligence like doesn't hold any weight. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have. Oh yeah, for example, Miami English doesn't have any sense. Porque no tiene sentido. Doesn't make sense, right?
Es verdad, es cierto. Y creo que de nuevo es un ejemplo de cuando queremos simplificar una pregunta, pensando que vamos a encontrar una respuesta simple también, cuando en
Right.
realidad hay que cuestionar la pregunta.
But yeah. ¿Por qué no? Preguntas, la propia no tiene sentido, no tiene la propia sentido. No tiene sentido en el propio sentido, sí. Pero, pero en general, para responder a esta pregunta, okay, so it's from the idea of intelligence, but it's also from the idea of like, okay, how do I put it? Like, does making languages make you more empathetic? Sí. Es como, realmente es solamente como la pregunta, la primera pregunta, como, con el the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, no creo que, ok, realmente no creo que el idioma que una persona habla tiene pesado o tiene un
o que influencie de alguna manera, o sea responsable de...
Sí, no tiene... No es tan responsable, no es responsable por la personalidad o los características de una persona. Y así. But, okay. And again, it's like a chicken or egg question, right? Do more empathetic people learn languages, or does learning a language make you more empathetic? Because, like, para mí o para los otros traductores en las organizaciones en que yo trabajo, trabajamos en estos ambientes porque para nosotros, no importamos los derechos y sí, los derechos y las dificultades o las difíciles de las personas, de las otras personas. Pero en este caso, is it that we care more to learn these languages and to be translators, or is it that we learned these languages because we learned these languages and made us more empathetic?
Right. Yeah, it's chicken again.
En realidad,
Absolutely. Es cierto, es verdad. Además, hay muchas personas que son multilingües o al menos bilingües porque se vieron obligados a aprender esa segunda lengua, ya sea por el contexto social, porque emigraron a otro país, no necesariamente porque querían mejorar como personas y eliminar los prejuicios, era porque lo necesitaban. Entonces, quizás a nivel personalidad no impactó en absoluto ese nuevo idioma. Sí, depende mucho de la personalidad. Creo que es incluso más compleja la pregunta.
En cualquier situación en que una persona habla el idioma nativo de una otra persona, of course it will seem like closer, you know.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah, it shows that you've spent. I mean, you've invested out of your time and efforts, and many times money as well, into learning something that's like identitarian to other a group of people, and maybe you, and even more so when you didn't need to, even more so when you
Hmm.
you never encountered, let's say, like a Dutch person in your day-and-age life, but you speak Dutch, and you meet a Dutch person. It shows that you have invested on your time and effort and so on, onto learning something that's that
Yeah.
they relate to very closely. And yeah, of course, I think that's primarily, like, a priori, it's a very nice connection that you make to with a
Oh, a
stranger.
priori, we're here with the Latin. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ah,
Okay, I know a couple Latin words that I think I know when to put in in a sentence. Not much, not very much.
edible.
There we go. Yeah, like
Ah,
quoting someone. And you quote someone like seek, and multiple other Latin words
yeah.
that we have around that. Okay, now I'd like to move, talking about Latin. Now, I mean, I'd like to move on to a topic that, as far as I know, that you're very keen on, which is language extinction and endangered languages. This is what we were talking about at the beginning, I think. To put it into numbers, correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, there are around 7,000 languages spoken around the world. How many will be left by the end of the century, let's say, or in a couple of decades' time?
I mean, some estimates. Again, this is difficult
Yeah,
because, like, the definition of what a language is so
yeah,
dependent on, the variety, the prestige, the socio, like las condiciones sociales. I can't think of it in English.
Right, so yeah, this is
Yeah.
es una charla multilingüe. Don't
Ah,
worry sobre eso.
we
No,
can't, but yeah,
yeah,
the
okay,
social
cool.
conditions, that's what it is. Oh my God. The conditions
It's
for
very
skills.
early for you. Yeah, I would appreciate that as well. When you let
Yeah.
you guys know that it's very early for Cody right now. So yeah, I mean,
I'm used to this. Anyway, right? But I mean, the predictions are about half of them will be gone. Like generally, so about 3,500, like 3,000 over will be gone by the end of the century. This was like a video that I saw pretty recently as well that basically repeated the same figure.
yeah,
But I mean, like, do I believe this figure? I don't know. I mean, not. I mean, do I believe that a lot of languages are going extinct? Yeah, definitely. Do I believe that
mhm,
it will be that number? Again, I don't know.
right,
Right?
yeah.
It's hard to say. Um, because every community has will put in its own efforts to save their language if they feel like they want to. And
Mhm.
so yeah, that's the way that I see it.
Okay.
But
And do you think, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no, sorry, carry on. Do you think that something you mentioned about like this topic in a couple of reels that went viral on your social media, but I would like to expand on it. Do you think it's plausible that eventually only one language will be spoken in the world, and not taking into consideration the cultural side of it, and it would be whether it would be a loss or like that kind of aspect? Since the tendency is that fewer languages are going to be spoken, do you think that it will be plausible that only one, be it one already existent or one created to serve that purpose?
mm, okay, so okay, idealmente sí, prácticamente no. Basically, that's my answer. Like ideally, in an ideal world, yeah, I think we could have one language, right? We could have one language that we use as a way of communicating between our languages, between our
Mhm.
cultures, and eventually maybe that language will become the single world language. Practically, who is going to do that? Who is
Yeah,
deciding which language this is? Who is
yeah,
deciding,
really.
you know? And it's inherently colonial back then because,
Mhm.
for example, like so many languages were stomped out because of colonialism and the predominance of European languages. And I mean, that's the reason for so much language endangerment now, is that a lot of these colonial powers basically banned like either genocided their way into it or forced children to never speak their native language. So, and I mean, in other ways, there are soft power languages where basically they stop these other languages from being spoken because they have more economic value, right? Because, you know, it'll be like, why should I learn my village's language when I can just learn the central language and go to the city and make money? You know, that kind of thing.
Or when I not only like I in a way I need to learn the city's language in order to make a living, let's say. Maybe from their point, from their perspective, it would be also like that, and in that sense it'd be as well difficult to what can you do to maintain those languages or to avoid them being or getting extinct?
It starts in school. It really starts in school. Where you know there should be an emphasis on using the language in schools, because if kids are using it, the language will definitely survive at the end of the day. It's actually, and if you take it out of schools, if you take it out of the kids, then the kids will never, then the language dies, because language is only as good as the number of speakers it has. And let's say, you know, a language can have 1 million speakers, but if the 1 million speakers are all in their 50s to 80s, that language is definitely endangered. You know?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just about like the how many speakers the language has, but also like the condition of those speakers and what they prioritize.
Exactly.
And what they... Oh, interesting.
So, so it's very similar to like let's say Singaporean Min Chinese. So Singaporean Min has kind of merged into one. Like there are two varieties, mainly Hokkien and Teochew, but they've started to merge because of like they're similar, and also at the same time they have had a lot of overlap. Like that is spoken mainly by people my parents' age. Like most people my age can understand it, but if you ask us to have a fluent conversation, we will start sprinkling in all the English or all the Mandarin. We can't have a full conversation. I can't have a full conversation. Very few people my age can have a full conversation in the language. And so like on Wikipedia, it says it has about 1.2 million speakers, but it's definitely, this variety is definitely endangered in the Singaporean context.
And are there any actions being performed right now in order to...
It was actually banned by the government in schools and on the radio in the during the early time of independence, because they wanted us to speak better Mandarin so that we could communicate with China. Because basically the language is very different. And because most people didn't know how to speak Mandarin, most people only knew how to speak their variety of Chinese. So it was this move to be like, oh, you know, people can't be trilingual. Oh my God, multilingual people, impossible. They're not smart enough for that, which is it's an actual thing a politician here has said. Is that people are not smart enough to be multilingual or something like that.
Okay, well, that's a huge battle. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that for a very long time. Come on, but what kind of... But there's multiple things to analyze on that not very politically correct thing coming from a politician. Okay.
Anyway, basically, that was in the past. It was like, oh, our population are not smart enough to have, or at least it will degrade out their quality of their Mandarin, Chinese, and English.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. You know.
Yeah. Okay.
That means, right? But you know, and because the variety. Okay, to be fair, the Chinese varieties that's spoken are quite different. So, for example, like I'm testing your Chinese. For example, in Mandarin Chinese.
Oh, fake code is no, but come on, not Chinese.
Yeah, for example, I'm sick. I'm going to the hospital. I'm sick. I need to go to the hospital. In Mandarin Chinese is 我生病了，我现在要去，我现在需要去医院。Right. For example, Hokkien, Singaporean Hokkien is 我急中患病了，我就要去录音。
The last section, it's like en Argentina solemos decir, o en español solemos decir, cuando algo es muy complejo decimos es chino básico.
Claro.
Well, for me, literally, it's Chinese for me. This
Yeah.
is literally Chinese. Okay.
Yeah.
Analysis. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so basically you can hear how they're very different, right? And then so coming back to the question of how do we preserve these languages, is we use them, and I mean, for me, I've been trying to use them more with my dad, right? So I mean, which is why I guess I'm quite a bit more fluent now than I used to be. But even then, you need to be able to do it and use it in schools to prevent this language death, right? And so for me, that's like the big solution. And I think coming back to an earlier question I didn't answer, so it was about how practically how would we have one world language, is also that, and how like that is inherently colonialist because of the sort of like power that has been put onto languages in the past. And like, oh wait, sorry, yes, so I answered that. It was the fact of how did we get so many endangered languages now is colonialism, accelerated language death. So language death is a natural process as different groups interact with one another, and
Right.
certain languages get sucked into bigger ones. But a lot of language death has been accelerated by globalization, which
Okay.
comes off the back of colonialism, because even if a community was effectively bilingual, so like they speak like their native language at home and then the colonial language in school, there are many examples of colonial, like colonists stealing children from their homes and beating their language out of them, basically. So that was documented as happening in the United States, Canada, and Australia. And it's just profoundly sad, because it was this idea that these languages were indicators of, or like they showed that this population was savage, they were lower than them. But inherently, we know that's not true, right? But that basically is why accelerated language death is occurring at the moment. Yeah. And then on top of that, there's the globalization aspect with people moving to cities and economic value. But yeah.
And is there like a formal way of documenting a language so that it's, and how is that process carried on?
So it's a very, very lengthy process. It takes many,
I
many
can
years
imagine.
and a lot of money from universities.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah, that's right.
yeah, but basically, so it's like getting as many recordings as you can of the language being used in natural settings. So this is for languages that haven't died yet. For languages that have died already, there are other ways of saving the language, or other ways of like slowly reconstructing the language. But before you will have any fluent speakers of the language ever again. But for languages that are dying, or like maybe left with like 10 speakers, you basically record as many things as you can between those 10 speakers speaking to each other, speaking about topics. So like a wide variety of topics using a wide variety of like different syntactic structures. So like you might ask them to talk about like state this, like, because like the language that you might use to be like, this is a phone is very different from like, I believe that the theoretical implication, like, you see what I mean? So it's got different, it's basically getting a bunch of different registers, a bunch of different syntactic instructions, and basically putting them into a database. And this is a whole area of linguistics called corpus linguistics. So, like corpus, like cuerpo, right? So it's like the body of
Latin, isn't it?
Latin. Yeah, exactly.
Trilingual webinar, yeah.
Trilingual webinar. Yeah, so it's basically looking at how we can compartmentalize and organize the data such that it's easily accessible for future generations of the language, of the language's culture, basically.
Right, and many people that are not precisely attracted to languages as we are, let's say, might be thinking, and I've actually encountered this. They told me if the tendency is that as time goes by, fewer languages will be spoken in the world, should we bother learning new languages if we don't need to?
Well, right now, you still kind of need to learn other languages to talk to other people. I mean, English, obviously, like I'm mainly speaking to you in English, also because it's also one of my native languages, right? But like English has taken on a role as the international language, right, in a way. But at the same time, like English is a hard language to learn. It is such a difficult language to learn.
You
It's
say
so
that because you're
inconsistent.
empathetic with the rest of the people, or because you actually feel like that?
I feel that way because English has so many conceptions, exceptions. Like there's so many
Yeah.
exceptions to the rules, right? Like it's not consistent at all, right? Like why a certain spelling, like why is like E, like the letter E pronounced like 8 different ways?
Yeah, the phonetical inconsistency is a
Yeah,
it
or
goes
like the
ahead of
grammatical inconsistency
more
as
than one.
well.
Yeah.
The way you conjugate verbs in English,
Hmm.
like it's so inconsistent as well. So it's like in yeah, but yeah. So is there a use for learning languages in the moving forward? Personally, yeah, I do definitely believe so. That continuing to learn language will definitely continue, because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to learn English. And also English in its dominance is kind of waning, I'm going to argue, because the power of England and the power of the UK and the power of the US is slowly waning. Yeah. Oh, there's actually a comment.
Absolutely. We welcome everyone to ask you
Is
questions.
there
If
a
we are able
standard?
to, we will les vamos a evacuar a toda aquella duda. Muchas gracias por unirse. Let's see. Chinky asks,
Yes.
is there a standard for linguists in determining whether a person can speak a language or not, given that a person's skill in speaking another language is on a scale and not just a binary thing? Oh, okay. It's all
So
yours.
very
Thank you
good
very much for the
question.
question. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Very good question. So we have something called the CEFR, which is like the European Framework for Languages. So that grades you from a scale of A1 to C2. A1 being absolute beginner, C2 being like you're essentially a native speaker of the language, right? But this inherently classifies you based on something a bit arbitrary. Again, scales are like language is so arbitrary. Language has no
Border.
how fluent are you in a language? Like for example, like I really I understand, like for example, I understand Spanish like 100%. Can I can I produce Spanish 100%? Definitely not. Can I produce I end up speaking Portuguese half the time and trying to speak Spanish, right?
We will understand you, Cody. Don't worry.
Especially with like Argentinian Spanish, because all your ears have become sure.
Sí, es cierto. Igual dentro de Argentina es tan amplio las tonadas que pueden variar, digamos, en la Patagonia y en algunas zonas cerca de Chile, el acento o la tonada argentina de esas regiones se asemeja mucho al acento chileno, la región chilena, y hasta, bueno, incluso el acento porteño, ¿no? El de Buenos Aires ha sido muchas veces vinculado con el acento italiano. ¿No? El acento porteño, sí, como que no lo voy a replicar porque no me va a salir, pero bueno.
Tu acento para mí también me parece un poco de italiano también, porque simplemente la mayoría de los inmigrantes recientes a Argentina fueron italianos.
Sí, italianos y españoles, sí somos una muy linda mezcla, una muy linda sopa.
Alemanes también, ¿no?
¿Cómo?
De Alemania, ¿no? También.
Sí, sí. De hecho, hay muchas ciudades en diferentes provincias. Hay múltiples ciudades que fueron colonias alemanas y de hecho preservan todavía la arquitectura y demás, y ya son algo turístico, ¿no? Un atractivo turístico también, pero porque hace relación y está vinculado al valor histórico de aquellas comunidades que inmigraron. Y también somos una mezcla con muchas comunidades nativas. Es una gran pot, a nice pot, mixed pot of cultures.
I mean, definitely. I mean, as with most countries nowadays, I mean, Singapore's the same. But yes, so coming back to the question, I'm so sorry. So on this framework, like, you could definitely have it on a scale, and you can definitely use them for, and like these scales are useful for like finding employment. So like for me, like I have my Dele B2, like my Dele B2, so that I can work in a Spanish speaking country, right? But does it mean that like I speak Spanish? I mean, based on this, yeah, I do. But like,
Yeah.
am I
Do you feel
fluent?
like it?
Am I
Right.
perfect? No, obviously not, right? But like, so I guess in that sense, there is a standard, but I don't think the standard really holds weight outside of formal context. So like jobs and things like that. I would
And can
say
we
that.
think that, yeah, that there's this kind of scales, maybe analyzing each one of the big four skills, let's say, you can be anywhere between A1 to C2 as to listening, and from A1 to C2 as to reading comprehension, whatever. It's like we're not getting rid of the scaling system that has its flaws, but at the same time, in a way, we are kind of detailing it a little bit better. What do you think about that?
I agree. Yeah, but I mean, I think to me, that's definitely a big point. But also, if you think about it, what does it mean to speak a language? It's just to be able to have someone else understand you. And so for me, I mean, personally, I consider myself to speak a language when I can make myself understood to another person in most general contexts, or at least in a basic context. Like, even the grammar can be the most ugly, screwed up grammar that you've ever seen in your life. But like, for example,
If it serves
like,
the purpose, yeah.
it
But
serves its purpose.
it's interesting that you mentioned when you are able to make yourself understood, meaning that you don't consider it as like as important. You understanding, meaning the passive thing.
No, understanding too. Understand, like,
Right,
so
but
I mean,
I mean,
if you're saying
let's say you can
you speak,
understand broadly, but do you think, let's say, like I studied German like 10 years ago or something, and I studied for a very short period of time, very intensive. Like I got to like intermediate level in, I don't know, in 4 months, 5 months, and then in that kind of way, like I had to do other things, so I stopped learning it, and it started decreasing, obviously. But now, if I listen to someone speaking German, yeah, I'm going to be able to understand a couple words and maybe the gist of the sentence, but I won't be able to produce that kind of sentence at all unless I start learning it again. So I wouldn't consider myself as speaking German, but I do kind of understand a little bit. So in that sense, it's like I am as well prioritizing my ability to produce and to make myself understood, even though that I could understand someone. I won't be able to give that.
I agree. I mean, for me, I mean, maybe it's just because of the way that I learn languages. I tend to learn, like, if I can produce words, I definitely will be able to identify them if they're being spoken to me. So yeah. So I mean, that's my benchmark. Personally, I find it a bit weird now that I've been labeled as this 11 language guy, because can I speak 11 languages at that time? Definitely. Will some of my languages get worse as I go along? Definitely. Right? Like I used to be able to speak. Yeah, like I used to be able to speak quite like fairly intelligible, like what was it now? I used to be able to speak fairly intelligible Japanese at one point. If you ask me to speak Japanese now, I'll just be like, Kore.
Arigato.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Yeah, I know a couple of Japanese songs out of songs. Like I listen to a lot of music, like from music in all sorts of languages, and I feel like it's a very interesting way of learning things that you wouldn't find in like conventional course.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I know how to say the Matsuri. Like I don't know what's going to be what. Like yeah, I'm not gonna use it ever. I think.
Yeah.
Right now, kaze. I think it's like wind. It's like, how are you, Matsuri? But I think it's interesting anyway.
Definitely. I mean, I started learning Spanish because I was listening to a lot of reggaeton, which is not a great way to learn very formal language. At the same time, I know how to say some pretty dirty things in Spanish because of it.
I can imagine that.
Because
But
it's from reggaeton.
if it serves its purpose, if it's yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, yeah, reggaeton. But do you actually understand like the lyrics? Not meaning like when you read them, but when you listen to the song, are you able to understand? Because for many of us, like Spanish speaking people, we can listen to a reggaeton song if they sing in cursive, and very like sometimes you can hear the twerking, and you don't even understand the words they're saying. That's a very difficult way of starting a language.
100%. I mean, if it's something like what's a good example, like Me Rehuso by Danny Ocean. I think that song is pretty clear. Like you can understand it.
Yeah.
But if you were to talk about somebody like I guess some Osuna songs, I'm like, huh? or like, yeah, or Rauw Alejandro. I'm like, I know. Okay.
I would question myself whether I speak Spanish. If I would start doubting my own Spanish abilities when I listen to them.
The worst one for me is Rosalia. She's not even Latin.
Yeah, that's right. But she's very difficult to be understood when she speaks as well. Like I remember there was a song. I was listening to a song of hers. I didn't know it was her, and I actually liked the song. So I was like wondering, what kind of language is this? It sounds really like exotic, interesting. So I used this application with the the Shazam thing. And Rosalia, like, what the hell? I've lost my mother tongue.
Exactly. No, the first Rosalia song I ever heard was Apale. And all I gathered from it was Mi Marelo Ojo.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's very
So
you need to be very brave to start learning Spanish through them.
But yeah, so I mean, learning languages through that was pretty useful. But yeah, so coming back to my topic, I'm now literally known in Singapore as the 11 languages guy, and I'm like, I will definitely lose some of the capabilities of these languages as I go along when I get busy and I don't really have time to maintain them. At the same time, if I learn new ones and I lose old ones, the list of languages I speak is going to change. And
at least it's going to be like constant. It's going to be always 11, but the list is going to be changing.
Then people can
they're not going to be wrong.
You lied. You said it was this, and I'm like, yeah, but that was that point, you know. And like the thing is that language ability is not constant, right? Like if you don't use a language for a while, you're gonna lose the ability to speak it to some degree. Like I haven't spoken Spanish in a very long time, so and because I speak a lot of Portuguese in Oxford, and because I was taking Portuguese initially, and also like there's a very large Brazilian population in Oxford, so I end up speaking so much more Portuguese than I do Spanish. So I mean, like my Portuguese has gotten a lot better, and then like it's taken over my Spanish to some degree because it's like, you know, it's so similar that like, you know, now when you ask me to think of like the word for early, it'll be like, oh, I'm like cedo, temprano, you know, like that's a good example of a word that's not the same, but yeah.
No, absolutamente, sí.
Yeah.
Sí, de hecho, o sea, son muchas más las palabras que son diferentes que las que son similares, pero sí, de alguna forma es como que atraen a alguien que tiene ganas, digamos, de aprender el otro idioma, quizás a un hablante de español, le atrae del portugués, que hay similitudes y demás, pero por supuesto que quizás, o sea, a nivel the core, oh my gosh, the core, they are obviously different.
This is the source.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sometimes I forget my own. I mean, when you start talking in a different language, in a way, you start thinking in that language. So it's like
Mm,
you start feeling more comfortable in that new language, and going and switching to a different one. Sometimes it's challenging. So let me ask you, de todos los idiomas que hablas ahora, ¿con cuál te identificas más?
ujú. Wait, en
¿Con
todos
cuál
los idiomas que hablo,
¿Con cuál te identificas más? Like, which one is more relatable to you?
I was about to say, ¿en cuál forma?
Whatever you want to take it. Like, what do you think? Which language you think describes you better? If you feel that way, or if you just feel that, I don't know, you can use any of those languages as you please, or in a way that you are able to express yourself independently of the language that you're using. Um, I don't know. Like I've asked these questions to many people, and they all go, "My mother tongue is the one that I relate to the most."
Mm,
Like I cannot compare my mother tongue to any of the other languages that I speak, because my mother tongue is my mother tongue. It's got that kind of
yeah,
connotation.
I
Do you feel the
mean,
same way?
ok, puedo responder en español. Ok, claro, ok. Para mí, claro que inglés es el idioma más que yo hablo con más fluidez, ¿sí?
Mhm.
Pero también en el contexto de Singapur, en el contexto de los países postcoloniales, en el portugués, coloniales,
Genial. It's
postcoloniales,
so cool.
¿sí?
Sí, sí, sí.
Aquí falamos portuñol.
Hablemos portuñol, te entiendo, yo te entiendo, no puedo replicarlo, pero te
Sí,
entiendo.
se llama portuñol. Se llama portuñol. Sí, okay. Sí, pero
Okay.
en los países coloniales, um,
Pero
los,
eso es muy, muy bueno, tienes muy buenas muy habilidades para hablar idiomas, no te preocupes.
sí, los idiomas o las lenguas maternas o las lenguas culturales de la población, para mí en general, tienen una, como un lugar o un lugar especial dentro de la alma de la población.
Mm,
Y para mí también, el idioma que para mí que like resonates, you know, o
ujú.
resonada
Sí,
conmigo
no sabría cómo decirlo en español. Es como, sí, que
es
resuena más.
como más, que yo solo más es como es malay, o específicamente malayo baba, porque es la lengua materna de mi Lola, Tagalog.
I can feel our brains fuming.
I can feel my languages combining in my brain.
Like there's like a one smushed,
Just
one
one
smushed
mush.
language.
Yeah, because mi abuela, la lengua materna de mi abuela, y también Hokkien, o Hokkien chino, like, sí, o Hokkien chino, que mi padre habla, que mi padre habla como su lengua materna también.
Claro.
Y aunque no hablo, si no los hablo fluentemente o con fluidez, um,
Ujú.
claro que puedo hablar y hacer que las otras personas pueden entenderme,
Te
¿sí?
entiendan, claro.
Y también hay algunas frases y algunas expresiones que yo uso, y que yo utilizo en, en algunas partes de mi vida, como partes intimadas de mi vida, como, o partes acerca de mi corazón, ¿sí? Como
Oh, está sonando muy
en
tierno. Sí, 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 te entiendo.
sí, claro, por ejemplo, en Hokkien hay una expresión que es "Huan Yi Diu Ho", que también es un título de una canción popular.
Oh,
Pero se describe para vivir una vida, ok, Huan Yi Diu Ho, para vivir una vida con hmm, Huan Yi en inglés es
Joaquín,
Huan Yi. Ok,
Joaquín.
en mandarín es Juan Si. Juan 是欢迎 welcome. Si
Okay.
as in 喜欢 I like. So it's like Juan Yi. En español es como en inglés no puedo de traducir
Sería
en
como
inglés también, pero
fulfill,
es como
como
to be
fulfillment.
happy, I guess. Para
Mm,
sí.
glad to be fulfilled
Yes,
or glad.
I guess to be glad, right? Yeah, I guess to be glad. Sí, para ser contento o para ser contento con un poco de alegría.
You need a word
eh,
for that. Ay,
sí,
mal ahí. Hay que crear una palabra para eso. Es cierto.
sí,
Es verdad.
es bastante para vivir una vida completa, simplemente. Y uso esa frase muchas en mi vida cotidiana porque es como mi mantra. Es, sí, es como la significada de toda mi vida, ¿no?
Entonces sería como, o sea, vivir una vida con algo de alegría, digamos, o con algo de satisfacción. Es
Sí,
suficiente para tener una vida.
sí,
It's,
es como para ignorar un poco, o ignorar las cosas minutas y, y, y como le importan las cosas cotidianas, como, y para hacerlas, hacerlas, o fazer con que, en portugués, hacer con, like, to make you oneself, I guess, to make oneself happy, or like to make
ok,
oneself content through these daily things, you know.
ok. Es como, o sea, claro, encontrar
Sí,
a través de las pequeñas cosas como de la rutina y demás, son para hacernos para hacernos contentos, para hacernos sentir contentos,
sí,
bien, glad, guau. Así.
sí, sí,
No, no, no,
sí,
creo que no, pero es muy complejo de trasladar.
sí, es un
Y
poco
en este
complejo para traducir, en general, para traducir estas frases en cualquier idioma es, es tan difícil porque esas frases no solamente tienen sus significados, pero también tienen sus sentidos culturales y
claro.
sus lugares en la cultura. Y sí, y para volver a la pregunta, sí, para mí, claro que inglés es mi lengua materna, pero para mí el idioma que está más cerca de mi corazón los idiomas son malayo y hokkien.
Bueno, yo, ¿quién? Ok, nice. Y piensas, en ese sentido, ¿piensas que es posible llegar a tener una traducción lo más... ¿Es posible hacer una traducción específica de ese tipo de frases y demás, de expresiones. ¿Es posible llegar a traducirlo de lo más cercano posible, digamos, a lo original? ¿O siempre
Mm,
estaremos lejos de sentir de verdad ese concepto, ese contenido que está lleno de connotaciones, de
mm,
idiosincrasia y demás? Eh, ¿Será posible en algún momento traducir verdaderamente eso a otros idiomas? Llevado a todas ese tipo de expresiones y demás, ¿no?
mm. Ok, para los traductores académicos o en general traductores, um, depende del contexto, ¿sí? Si, si, si un traductor está traduciendo por ejemplo, el gobierno, ¿sí? El sentido literal es lo que más importante para
Claro.
traducir, pero para los traductores de literatura, ¿sí?
Ujú,
Um, los sentidos o sí, los sentidos más metafóricos o más
ujú,
metaforical, ¿sí? Más metaforical, o también que describir las emociones lo que, o, o las cosas o los valores de las
ujú,
palabras más pequeños, sí, como ser más importante cuando comparada
ujú,
con el sentido literal, sí,
ujú. Sí, 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 absolutamente.
sí.
Ujú.
Realmente es solamente
Y en
depende
sentido
del
supongo va a ser
contexto.
mucho más.
Sí.
Claro, claro, claro. ¿Y qué te voy a decir? Y de los idiomas que has estudiado, eh,
Mm.
slash hablas, slash lo que tú quieras, ¿cuál es hasta ahora el más complejo para ti, más difícil de
El
aprender?
más complejo. Ok. ¿Cómo,
¿Qué es complejo?
cómo lo
No, no,
dije?
no.
¿Cómo lo dije? La palabra complejo es un poco pesado, ¿no? Pero
Pero
para mí,
para ti, digamos, en tu opinión, ¿sí? Para mí,
sí, en mi
aprender inglés
opinión,
desde
en mi
español no
propia
fue tan
experiencia,
difícil. Sí,
sí, en mi propia experiencia, el idioma que, que fue el más difícil para mí, para aprender, eh, que yo hablo, dentro del 11 o
¿Hay más?
hay más.
Lo que-
Hay más
Dentro de los que
que lo
estudias.
estudié, que los estudié, pero no puedo hablar ahora. Sí.
Ok.
Um, ok. Dentro del 11, Tamil, porque no hay muchos recursos para aprender el idioma, especialmente el idioma coloquial,
Ujú.
porque, sí, porque no hay intereses, intereses en portugués interesantes o no hay interesa, interesas, o no hay muchas
Claro, o sea,
interesas.
en general, digamos, a la gente no le interesa. O sea, suena feo, pero digo, es al no haber tanto interés en la población para aprenderlo, tampoco
Ah,
hay tanto contenido como
sí,
quizás habría de otros idiomas. Entonces, ¿es en ese sentido?
sí, no, sí, 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 no hay intereses de los extranjeros o las personas fueron afuera de India o Singapur o Malasia, o, 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 o tampoco en las personas singapurenses o malayos malasianes, Malaysians,
Bueno,
que,
sí, sí, sí,
que no
maravilloso.
son malayos, sí, malayos como que no son, um, que no son personas indias o personas tamiles, no hay muchos intereses en el idioma. Así que el idioma no hay, especialmente el idioma coloquial, no hay muchos recursos para aprender, pero para mí, el idioma que tiene la gramática más compleja o más difícil para mí para entender es Tagalog. Tagalog, que es el idioma oficial de las Filipinas. Porque puedo hablar Tagalog y en mi vida cotidiana, porque hay muchos amigos, y así porque tengo muchos amigos filipinos, y también my nanny, like the person who raised me growing up, like en una filipina. Y puedo entenderlo perfectamente, pero hay como sobre complicaciones, como like over complications, right? In that sense. For example, grammatical. No puedo hablar en español porque
Eso se habla de español perfectamente. No, por favor, no.
Es como grammatical focus, basically. So it's symmetrical voice. Oh God! So these are very complicated concepts in
Sorry for asking that. Because you need to, I mean, you need to simplify terms that I know you know a lot about, so it makes it even worse to simplify it.
Yeah,
but
I don't think I've had the word simplified in English, let alone Spanish. But but yeah, so grammatical voice, for example, is like the verb. There are more hay más conjugaciones en Tagalog con los verbos de español, cuando comparado con español. Por ejemplo, kain is to eat, right? But then you can say kumain or kinain. So kumain they both mean present tense, past tense, I eat, right? But if you say kumain, you have to say kumain ako. So for example, if we eat, right? Kumain tayo, but you say kinain natin. But they both mean we eat. Because kumain means the focus is on the person doing the action. So kumain tayo ngayon, we eat now. Whereas kinain natin ang manok, we eat chicken.
Ooh.
So, and then this applies to every single verb in the language, and it's not just these two conjugations. There are other conjugations like bigay is to bring something, but to binigay is to take something to someone. Bumigay means I take myself away, I die.
And take myself.
Yeah. Ibinibigay means I have not yet taken something.
My gosh. Yeah, I mean, it's basically. Yeah. Wait. Yeah.
¿Cómo explicar en español o cómo explicar en general? No
puedo. It wasn't an easy question, anyways. And let's see if this question is easier. I doubt it, but from your perspective, which language of all the ones you know, speak, whatever, has the best jokes or the best memes? Okay, this is good.
Oh, that's a difficult one. I don't know. They're all funny. I think
That's
all of
nice.
them. My answer is all of them. They've all got their own
Okay.
jokes, their own inside jokes, which I think is quite good, right? Because when you learn a new language, you don't just learn a new culture. You don't just learn like the new ooh, traditional culture. You also learn all the meme culture, the jokes that come with it. And so it's pretty
Yeah,
funny. It's like now one of my funniest ones is the Filipinos have this game called Lato Lato, and it's like their own inside joke because there was this like porn star who like went on stage and did the Lato Lato, and then it just became a joke. So everyone
okay.
on my TikTok, on Filipino TikTok, everyone's just there like,
To say, oh no, where you come from? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, when they do, I mean, that's good. They,
like as in
it's like,
it's like
yeah,
two balls on a string. It's two balls on a string, and then they just go there, and go there, and then it goes, tuck, 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 and then it
I
just
see that.
yeah,
It's appeared in my For You page.
yeah.
My timeline. Yeah, I mean, when you learn a new language, in a way, you're unblocking as well a new realm of humor or understanding humor.
Yeah.
And cool. And we're almost getting to the end. I don't want to. It's like the sun is shining already. I don't want you to. No quiero
Amanecer.
retenerte durante tanto tiempo. Pero me
Don't
gustaría saber
worry.
seguro estás familiarizado con el concepto que es que trending thing among social media and among people, like let's say that speak multiple languages, which is the
Mhm.
idea, the feeling that our personality changes when we switch between languages. And you
Yep.
actually made a very funny video on
I did a video
Instagram
on
or
it.
TikTok, I think. Now my question is there any scientific basis that supports that or that explains that feeling that we get, or is it just like empiricism or just
It's
something that
empiricism. I'm not aware
viral?
actually of any evidence for this. Also, because how do you measure personality, right? Like with the tools that we have as psychologists, how do you measure personality? Is it suddenly like, well, I guess you could see like, oh, would someone when speaking one language are they more of a risk taker? Are they more of this? Are they more of that? Right? But even then, these are just like one aspect of different people's personalities, right? So how would you measure that? Personally, I don't think so.
What is
Really, I mean,
personality?
yeah. What like personally, do I think my personality changes when I speak different languages? Sometimes, definitely. Like I'm a lot more. But I mean, oh, a study just came to mind, which is there are people who tend to be more careful. So like it was shown that people make more careful decisions when using a language that is not their native language. So
Mm-hmm.
so like that can definitely affect their personality in the sense that it affects their cognition, right? Again, it comes
Mm-hmm.
back to this question of whether language affects their cognition.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I feel like sometimes some languages I just tend to be a bit more expressive, or like I
Hmm.
tend to use certain expressions from the language very commonly. So then it might come across that I'm very like happy in a certain language because the language, the words that I know, the phrases that I know are all very like, or like the things that I end up saying quite a lot are like, oh, happy things, happy thoughts. Whereas like some of them might just be a bit more doom and gloom. So like, for example,
What
in
language
Thai,
makes you feel like happier, or that
well,
kind of feeling? Which language gives you that sense?
well, I'm not really happy, but like just kind of like I love Thai actually has the most highs and lows for me because I speak Thai a lot because I work as a translator for migrant workers here, like sex workers and laborers. So like I end up talking to them quite a lot. And then the sex workers are always like, oh, like they're very expressive.
Yeah.
And then sometimes back then the laborers would also they would be very like calm and relaxed. But when I was working in Thailand, so I was working in Thailand as well as an intern, and my friends, like the political situation there is not very good. And so
Okay.
sometimes they will just say very like doomy things to me. So sometimes like one of the phrases I always end up using now in Thai is "ตายได้แต่ยังไม่ตาย," which means I could die, but I haven't died yet.
That's cool. That's very cool. I could die. I mean, it's always a chance.
But I haven't died yet.
But I haven't died yet. Point in that. Ay, me gusta mucho eso. Como, la voy a incorporar. ¿Cómo me lo repites?
Y ahora es su propia vida.
¿Cómo se? Podría morir, pero aún no lo he hecho. ¿Qué onda? Interesante.
Yeah. But yeah, what other examples do I have? Like sayings in other languages. Like, I guess it's like, I mean, it's like, maybe I feel like when I speak Spanish or Portuguese, I guess I'm a lot more formal because like they're the only context I end up actually using them very much. Or like, well, no, Spanish especially, I end up sounding very formal. Like por ejemplo, mi profesora de neurociencia, ella viene de Castilla y León, o sea, en España.
¿Castilla?
¿Sí?
Sí.
En
Castilla y León.
Sí, pero Castilla y León, ¿sí? Un estado en España,
sí,
¿no?
Sí.
Sí, cuando hablo con ella, la primera vez que hablé con ella, sí, yo dije que, usted. ¿Usted? ¿Usted? ¿Qué?
Es muy interesante, porque es como que sabemos que formalmente con personas desconocidas o personas con mayor autoridad y en personas mayores de edad, la franja, digamos, el año no está muy claro. Uno debería usar el usted, ¿no? Es mucho más formal, más elegante, etc. Pero actualmente es como que si a alguien le hablas de usted, es probable que se sienta como una persona más vieja. Entonces es como algo ofensivo, se siente como algo ofensivo, como, ¿cómo vas a decir?
Como ella.
De ser algo formal, elegante, a algo ofensivo, es como todo
claro, ella me dijo que, ay, no estoy tan vieja, ¿no?
No soy tan vieja.
Sí.
Ay, no, claro.
Sí, pero en el pasado, las situaciones que usé español son situaciones formales como en la escuela o también con mi entrenador de salsa que viene de la República Dominicana. No
Dominicano.
sé usted, pero como una persona con autoridad y así use español un poco más formal en esta forma, sí. Pero ya, como portugués and Portuguese, I just end up sounding very colloquial, very São Paulo, because I listen to so much baile funk.
Claro, eso también es la exposición del idioma que uno tiene. Claro.
Yeah.
¿Y cuál recomiendas, por ejemplo, que para aquellas personas que ya han estudiado quizás varios idiomas o que les interesa estudiar varios idiomas, cuál piensas que es la mejor forma de mantener de alguna manera el idioma que has estudiado, aun cuando no estés, digamos, estudiándolo en un proceso, ¿no? De estudio, de mantenerlo? ¿Cuál piensas que es como el mejor tip, de alguna manera? A couple tips for multilingual. Don't want to.
De hecho, la manera es solamente simplemente usar el idioma en cualquier forma, simplemente. Es como para mí, it's like listening to reggaeton or baile funk, right? In another way, just talk to yourself. Like, cuando siempre cuando duchando, es como...
Sí. Es como mantener la exposición de alguna forma, ¿no? Mantener, like, to maintain that kind of So probably the language, like the exposition to the language. Is it how you call it? I don't know.
Yeah, kind
but
of.
In a way,
It's
yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, it's like for me when I'm in the shower, right? Wait, me parece que Albi habla inglés de una manera.
De manera reformada también. It could be. Probably. I mean, yeah. I tend to. Like at the beginning, I tend to learn English through academic content, let's say, and then through listening to podcasts. But
As a
then
lot
at
of
the same
people
time,
do.
music. And now a lot of like social media has given me kind of the vocabulary. So I guess it's a kind of a mixture. But yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That's
It's a
it could
big
be.
mix.
Yeah. Carry on.
But yeah, so my tip for keeping it's talk to yourself in the shower. Or like
Right.
even for me, sometimes like I'll just be walking around and then I'll be like, oh, like cómo usar como la palabra teléfono para construir una frase en tamil o en tagalog o en malayo o en vietnamita. También es simplemente, oh, I'm walking, ¿cómo se dice I'm walking en vietnamita, And it's just things like that. So
right, to put yourself in a way no, but it's actually a very good tip. I mean, not everything is going to be like served in a way, or not everything is going to be easily accessible or like so obvious. This tip shows us in a way that it's the active engagement and putting ourselves in that kind of situation where we
active engagement is the best word for this, actually. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm honored. Thank you.
What do you mean?
I mean, you speak 11 languages. I'm sure about that. You're just being too modest. And a couple of things. What are you currently studying? Any like academically or like formally in a way? Studying any new languages?
So I don't study any languages formally anymore. So the last language I studied formally was Portuguese, in university, and then Spanish for my dele when I was taking my dele. But I mean, in terms of languages I'm learning now, I'm just trying to maintain the like I said, maintain the languages that I'm speaking now.
Yeah, which is not easy at all.
It's not, and I mean. And I think especially now that people have this expectation of me to speak these specific 11 languages, I have to be like, okay, I have to make sure they're good.
Yeah. that's the pressure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, show that you speak all the language. No, I mean, it's very, very very clickbaity thing, but yeah, at the same time it puts pressure on it.
As Oxford's best linguist speaks 11 languages.
Yeah, that's right.
And shocks people with 11 language ability. Oh,
with a trailer soundtrack.
But yeah, I mean, what was I saying? Yeah, so I'm learning Polish. I'm planning to learn Polish because the UK, especially like England has a very large Polish population who work in like lower wage jobs generally. In the past, like it's a stereotype, and it's kind of true. So I mean, in my work, I want to be able to support different groups, right? In the work that I do. So I've been learning Polish, and also one of my best friends in university, like she's Polish as well. So I end up speaking to her quite a lot. Like some of my best, and like another one of my very close friends is Polish, and so Polish at the moment. If not the other languages, like the other 11, but yeah, the other 10 of the 11, yeah.
Cool. The other 10.
Well, the other 9 technically. The other 9, yeah. Wait.
How did you come to Oxford? Like, how did you? Here we have another comment. Lua Wooters. Supongo que si aprendes un idioma en una escuela o institución, usarás vocabulario más formal. Sí,
naturalmente.
Me parece que sí. Sí. Muy bien ahí, Lua. Muchas gracias por los comentarios. I remind everyone that you can comment, obviously, and if you haven't been able to watch the entire thing, it's going to be uploaded on YouTube, and eventually we'll get subtitles that I have to edit as well. But you can obviously watch it a couple. One other thing that I'm very interested because I went to Oxford, and it was a beautiful, beautiful city. It feels like time stops there. I don't know. It's just, I remember it was
A
very
tiny what?
magical. How did you? I went to Oxford many years ago to study
Yeah, yeah,
English,
yeah.
and I wanted to know, how did you choose Oxford? How did Oxford come about? How did you choose
I
Oxford
have
to continue
Asian
your career?
parents. I have Asian parents. I am from Singapore. There are only so many schools overseas which your parents are willing to send you to if you have the money to go. Uh,
Oh, okay. And how do you like it? How is it? Now you're thinking, okay, okay, in case some of the
we are repeating.
okay, yeah, very
I
clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the university needs to change. It's very stuck in tradition, and it's not
Hmm.
like it's not changing with the modern era. It's not changing with the times, and
Hmm.
so I feel that the university needs to change. So, but how did I settle on it? Is that I mean my parents. Well, I decided to do it because it offered a double degree in in linguistics and at that time languages. So I started studying Portuguese. But it also offers a double degree in a lot of other combinations with psychology and all that. So because my research is going more towards psychology and neuroscience, I decided to take it. And so it was the uniqueness of that which I thought was quite good. And also because it's there are only so many unis which your Asian Singaporean parents will pay money to send you to if you have the money again. And so I picked it because it's famous, and the name brand and all that is valued in Singapore. So that was kind of the logic that went into that.
Cool. And how
Yeah,
different is life in Oxford versus in Singapore? I imagine it's probably
very,
it's quite
very,
different. And then
very.
how is it getting accustomed to not only studying at that high level of education, but also um, finding your way in a completely different city?
I mean, I'm someone who makes friends very quickly, and I'm also someone who adapts quite quickly. So for me, moving to Oxford wasn't very difficult because it was just a matter of finding new friends, like finding friends, just figuring out how to get around, figuring out where's the good food, where to go for drinks, where to go for food, where to go. Yeah, I'm very simple. I just need food,
Cool.
nice place to
Cool.
have food, a nice place to have drinks, just sit down with my friends and talk, and I think that was very easy to get accustomed to. What I think took a much longer time was the academic system at Oxford, because it's like I said, it's very traditional. So I that took a while for me to get used to. But yeah, it's what it is.
It's what it is, absolutely. Have you been able to travel to other cities in Great Britain?
So yeah, I mean, I've been to London quite a bit. I go to London like quite often. I mean, I land in London when I fly there.
Yeah.
I also have been to Edinburgh to see my friend. I use and then I do teaching. Well, it's like a support group basically, like a teacher assistant in Wales. So I've been to Cardiff. I've been to Swansea. Um, and so that's been very nice. I've also had the chance to take the bus to Paris. That was quite fun. The 9 hour bus to Paris.
Yeah, that must have been an experience.
It was really fun. The bus cost me like £30. So I was like both ways. So I was like, I was taking this bus to Paris.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh wow.
that was quite nice. I've also been to Malaga. In
Oh,
Spain. I've also been to because the flights in Europe are very cheap. So I've been to Malaga.
yeah,
I've been to
right.
Barcelona. Within Western Europe. That's been quite an interesting experience. I mean, it's convenient, like porque hablo español, but I
Yeah,
think
absolutamente.
it, yeah, but it was an interesting experience. I think navigating Europe, especially because it's so foreign to me. Navigating like mainland Europe, especially, was very interesting because the culture is so different, the ideas are so different. It feels like the attitudes of people there is just very different. And so it was quite interesting. Yeah.
Idiosincrasia, interesante. ¿Y a qué lugares te gustaría conocer próximamente si piensas viajar?
Claro.
¿Y qué otro, qué lugar te interesa?
Sorry.
¿Qué lugares te interesan conocer?
Todo el mundo. Mr. Worldwide, Mr. 305.
Absolutamente.
Realmente todo
Sí,
el mundo, porque cualquier lugar, sí, cualquier lugar tiene su propio cultura, su propio medio ambiente, o puntos de interés, de interés, o puntos de
sí,
interés, sí.
sí, sí, por supuesto.
Y así que creo que sí, todo el mundo.
No lo puedas hacer, Cody. A por ello, entonces. Muchísimas gracias
Okay,
a Cody. La verdad que ha sido. Tengo otro comentario más. ¿Cuántos años tiene Cody? How old are you?
okay.
In case you know.
¿Cuántos años tengo? 22.
22. Oh, yeah,
22.
you 22.
I'm 22 years old. Thank you.
22 years old. Okay. Yeah, you're a prolific student, multilingual, multi-talented. All right, Cody. Thank you very much for being here. I cannot stress
Thank you
enough.
so much.
It's been a very fruitful talk. We've been through multiple topics. In case you want to watch it again, guys, you can do so because it's going to be uploaded and on YouTube, and then it's going to be we're going to have captions in a very short time. So thanks a lot, Cody. I'm going to let you rest or do whatever you need to because I cannot stress enough how grateful I am that you've joined here today with me and your predisposition from the very first moments to being here and talk about the things that interest all of us. So if there's anything else that you want to add before we formally close, it's okay. You want to or either have breakfast or take a nap. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, you should. That brain needs to recover itself. It's okay. And
I don't even think my brain needs food. my brain just needs to stop. I'm just
yeah, I mean, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Cody. And
yes, thank you so much.
Hope you had a great time. Thank you very
I
much
had
for
a lovely
sharing
time. This was really fun.
I'm glad. I'm so glad to hear that. And hope you're very successful in your studies and whatever you need. You will want to do and whatever your countries that you like to discover.
Yeah.
I hope you're very successful and you find fulfillment in work or field that you decide to specialize in. Thank you very much, Cody. And until next time.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.